Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara, California. We're so excited to be here. We've been doing podcasts. We had a pancake breakfast this morning, learning all about the latest updates with the Open Service Broker API, new projects like Kubo. Here with Job Jackson, our managing editor, and Dr. Torg, two core people. Hey, Job.
Hey. Hey.
Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at the Cloud Foundry Conference in Santa Clara. It's the first day, and we're lucky to have as our first guest, Greg Otto, Executive Director for Cloud Services at Comcast. Hey, Greg.
How you doing? It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for for coming on the show. Tell us a little bit about what you do and like how you've been involved with Cloud Foundry.
So I work for the cloud team at Comcast, and I've been heavily involved with the Cloud Foundry and helping the development teams. We started our journey back in really 2013, but more so in 2014 we started to adopt Cloud Foundry. We made an investment there, and again, it was more than just the technology part. It was also changing our mind shift around how we develop and deliver software, and how the development teams and the operations teams and the testing teams really need to all come together and restructure to rally around our products and services and not have these strict silos.
So where are you today? Because then what I'd like to do is then go back to 2013, 2014. Tell us kind of the current stage you're at with the Cloud Foundry environment that you're building out, and what other symbiotic environments have you been building out with it?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So right now we have over 1,500 developers that are innovating on our platform every day, and we have over 12,000 application instances that are deployed on 9 different Cloud Foundation environments. We've recently deployed Cloud Foundry in a multi-cloud way in public cloud, and we're processing somewhere north of 210 million transactions every single day. So a big update from last year is we were in the tens of millions of transactions. Now we're seeing hundreds of millions of transactions every day, and the growth from the development community, the adoption has been just phenomenal, and it's mostly through word of mouth because they're finding out that life is a lot easier when you don't have to do so much infrastructure assembly.
Who's finding out?
The development community. So I'm not marketing the Cloud Foundry environment within Comcast. The development teams are doing that. So the tell a friend and they tell two friends is definitely the big phenomenon around why the adoption and the growth is so much.
Tell us about your the underlying data center architecture that you're on now, and what is new about it? Is it a new infrastructure that you've been building out, or how are you treating your data centers in this context with the overall infrastructure itself?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We're not super fancy, so we deployed Cloud Foundry initially on top of our internal private cloud. And we essentially built the infrastructure and the architecture much the same way that we provide our traditional infrastructure as a service. And now that we also are in the public cloud space, obviously we're using public cloud providers for infrastructure, but that's newer and much smaller.
What are you using?
We're using Azure, but not so much at the moment, and then Amazon is where we're doing some work with some of the product teams around building services in AWS.
So how do you delineate your workloads then, between what you're using in AWS and Azure versus what you're using on premise?
That's really up to the development team. So we're supporting again over 1,500 developers. They don't all work on the same teams. There's a specific product group that is specifically looking at public cloud deployment and multi-cloud deployment, both private and public. So, really the mileage varies. We're, providing a multi-tenant capability, and really the benefit for the development teams is that they don't have to refactor their app regardless of whether they're using me as a cloud provider or they're using, Amazon or any of the other public cloud providers. So that's really the benefit.
Okay. So you're saying that right now, you have about 1,500 developers now working on Cloud Foundry.
Yep.
You have about 12,000 application instances deployed on 9 cloud environments.
Yep.
You're working on MultiCloud. You have 210 million transactions. That's last year, up from tens of millions.
Yeah, that's daily.
So take us back to 2013, 2014. Where were you at that point?
So really it got started, I was working as part of the back office organization, and the business had specific challenges around some of our legacy applications, right? So the resiliency of the applications was a big challenge, right? So we were having disruptions that were impacting the business and impacting our customers. So that was really kind of where we got started, was we needed something a transformational change.
So tell us about the legacy apps. What were those challenges you were facing? What kind of apps are we talking about?
Yeah, that's again a good question. So we have hundreds, if not thousands, of applications.
Right.
And in the back office space, we have some 30-year-old mainframe technology that our billing applications are running on, and then all of the peripheral applications for things like provisioning and activation and order entry are all related, and they're very tightly coupled. So starting to decompose some of the monolithic applications while at the same time it's running our business. And that was really where a lot of the heavy lifting was. How do we
decomposition?
Yeah, we took several of our really big monolithic applications and broke them into microservices, and then moved them onto the platform. After, of course, we taught some of the development teams how to actually do agile development and all the best practices around test-driven development and continuous integration, continuous deployment. All those kind of more modern 12-factor app practices.
So you started adopting really the modern 12-factor app process.
Yes.
And you were breaking these monolithic applications down into microservices.
Yes.
What did that look like in its early days? What were some of the processes and techniques were you using? That's when you were starting to use Cloud Foundry?
Yes, and really the biggest challenge, certainly there's technology challenges, but it really was the people challenge around doing development differently. So instead of the developers and the operations teams and the testing teams all being separate, literally restructuring those teams to be responsible and accountable for, doing testing first through test-driven development practices, and moving to a faster 2-week release cycle. With smaller releases, all of those people changes to work differently in how we develop software was really the big part. Then we chose some high-value targets to move first. So one of the things, again, these are running the business at high volumes, so we created essentially an API services router that we can then peel services off, and as we re-architected them in microservices, we could determine the consuming application. We can direct them to services that were now being delivered through Cloud Foundry versus the legacy environment. So we can still keep all of the consuming applications unchanged, and then we can kind of decompose and move services a piece at a time. So we were able to start small, get our feet wet, and learn what some of the challenges and things that we needed to do to adapt before we really stepped on the gas and moved the rest of the services over.
Interesting. So you started decomposing those applications. You were teaching the teams to do agile, and you said the biggest challenge was people and helping them learn to do things different in restructuring the teams. So how are the teams how are the teams structured beforehand, and how did they change in that time period?
Yeah, there were again, strict organizational structures around the development teams, which were separate from operations teams, and also the testing teams were also separate. And again, this is all to the credit of those development, our development organizations that did all the heavy lifting, right? So they literally restructured and organized in a smaller kind of pizza-sized team way.
What did you guys use as the model for that, for restructuring and reorganizing? How did you know where to start?
So we got some help. So the initial engagement that I had was with Pivotal, and they started to work really, really closely with the development and the application teams, and they helped provide guidance and best practices around how do we start, what are the best ways to organize given the applications that we were targeting. And so they helped.
So sorry to keep interrupting, but what are some of those practices that you use today that were based upon that then?
All of those, again, 12-factor test-driven development, so testing first and then developing the product, continuous integration, continuous delivery, having pipelines. None of that existed previously.
Right.
And we were really committed to the people that we had on the team and retraining and retooling them. So they got some training, but it was really kind of through on-the-job training and migrating these services with some professional services help. So they really got to see not just how to do agile development and test-driven development, but also kind of retain that muscle memory through all of the migrations that they were doing. So we didn't go it alone. So we did have help, and that was a big part of it. And again, we were committed to the people that we had, and making sure that there was that there was that help.
So I've heard from other companies about how they've kind of rethought their kind of API infrastructure, and you're talking about the API infrastructure that you were building out at the time. Can you tell us more about that, about what you were doing there?
I can't go into a lot of detail there.
Right.
So essentially there's a number of different API kind of gateways that we have at Comcast, but specific to this particular application that we were moving, it essentially was an API router that allowed us to take the services and the requests from consuming applications that were coming inbound to our legacy application, and it essentially was a traffic cop. So if it was the set of services that we were targeting to move and decompose and move to microservices, then it would route those requests into the Cloud Foundry environment. Otherwise, it would continue to process in the legacy environment.
What product groups did you start with then with your Cloud Foundry integration? What were how did you decide which ones to begin with, through that modernization process?
So we migrated about three services over. I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but I know that it represented about 40% of the total volume of service requests. So there was probably 60 to 80.
Total volume of what?
The total volume of transactions a day. So this one application processes around 250 million transactions a day. So those first three services were high value targets because it represented about 40% of the traffic for the app. And then the rest of the 60 or so that we moved later comprised the rest. So we didn't want to start, with something really easy. We wanted to really prove the value of the methodologies and changing how we develop software, and then also the value of the platform by picking really, the strategic high value targets that would give us the most production benefit.
What were those high value targets?
I can't remember exactly what they were, but they were the most called upon. So probably getting customer information and other services around, getting account information, customer information, device information.
So basically, you had to think. So basically, you were basing it on the business, and
Yes.
the business demands that you had.
That's
and those
correct.
demands were based upon, customer information, account information, the infrastructure, the modem that they might have had.
Yep, exactly. So when people are, getting Comcast for the first time, or they're calling to, change their service or upgrade or whatnot, those are the services that get called upon the most. So those were kind of our high-value targets.
So you have all these customer-facing services, and then you also have content delivery services, right? So you're, all the programming and such, right?
Right.
Did you have to think about those differently then when you were thinking about this, or is it just come down to the bits at some point?
Yeah, no, it's those were mutually exclusive. So the application that we were moving is essentially a mediation platform.
Right.
So we didn't have to try and do too many things at the same time,
Right.
because the whole content delivery is a whole other dimension that is luckily loosely coupled from the services and the activation and provisioning and so forth.
So so they're loosely coupled in some respect, right?
Yes.
Right. So with where you are now, like the team, what percentage of the developers on staff at Comcast are kind of in these kind of microservices teams now?
That's a really hard question to answer. I don't know the answer to that.
But you have 1,500 developers.
Yeah, 1,500 developers. So, it is a significantly growing community.
Yeah.
And our most strategic platforms and applications in the company are really being, delivered in this way for quite some time. We've, been pretty good about disrupting ourselves and doing things in a new and different way. So, I'd say it's a fairly large percentage, but I can't really say for sure.
Right. So, where does your, so talking about the path that you guys have gone with Cloud Foundry, can you tell us a little bit about where you're going with it next? What is the plan to go forward with Cloud Foundry?
Yeah, there's a number of initiatives that are now public. So really, as far as the development practices, it's really cloud native first, and anything that is new that's being developed is certainly being delivered in that kind of 12-factor multi-cloud type of way. Comcast has some specific initiatives that affect these development teams around digital first. So interacting with our products and services in a digital first way is a big initiative, and self-healing, self-service, self-install, all of those pieces.
So you're pretty early in this stage around multi-cloud, right? Like
Yeah.
you're using Azure, using AWS, and you have your own infrastructure. How are you approaching it? Can you talk about some of the challenges you're facing, or what you've been learning, with using this multi-cloud environment? How are you starting?
Yeah, so I can talk about it at a high level. It really depends on the application. So some of our applications are best served closer to the customers. So a more highly distributed model of delivering the applications and services is a better approach, versus some applications that are really centered and closer to some of our national kind of footprint. So it really depends on the application and what we're trying to deliver. So there's definitely a shift for things that are being delivered closer to the customer. That makes a lot of sense, because from a scale standpoint, we don't want to have to home run all of the traffic, so to speak. So delivering that, improved customer experience by moving things closer to the customer is definitely a big trend, and that's part of, the multi-cloud, decision process. Mm-hmm. And then also, from a risk mitigation standpoint, we want to make sure that we have coverage. So we don't want to disrupt the experience of the customers because one particular environment has a disruption. So there's some risk mitigation strategy that goes into the decision process for hosting an application in a multi-cloud way.
So with those technologies, so are you using different CI environments then, and or is it continuous delivery environments between you must have to think differently about a lot of different things that are affecting kind of like the that whole process itself that requires continuous delivery in these situations.
Yeah, so I support many product teams, and there's not one CI/CD standard to rule them all. So there's a fair amount of autonomy, right, as there should be with different product teams.
Right.
So whatever the tool is that works best for them, then there's really no predisposition.
Right. What is the CI/CD kind of use cases that you're seeing for Cloud Foundry in particular? What are there any particular CI/CD platforms that you're using that you're by developers that come to mind?
There are. I mean, I don't want to really kind of speculate because there are so many different product teams, but all the popular CI/CD environments that you see and products that you see are being used, but I can't really expand too much on specific
what vendors
products.
You're using. Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for taking some time, Greg. Appreciate it, and good luck with the conference. And I guess you're going to be part on the keynote stage.
Yep, in just a little bit. So hopefully you'll check that out, and we're really excited to be here. Thanks for taking the time.
Have some fun. All right, thanks.
All right.
And our thanks to Cloud Foundry for sponsoring our podcast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara, California. Check out Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org, and talk to you again soon. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.